A nation once stood paralyzed, bobbing and weaving to avoid a killer they couldn't see. From the trunk of a blue Chevrolet Caprice, a man turned everyone's day life into a lethal lottery. Today, the expert marksman faces a clinical finality inside Greensville Correctional Center. To the families behind the glass, he is a defiant enigma, refusing to offer one word of regret. At exactly 9:11 p.m., the man obsessed with chaos will be silenced, taking his secrets to the grave. This is the story of John Allen Muhammad. If a killer dies in silence, does the truth die with him? Or is silence the final act of terror? Sergeant John Allen Muhammad's path to the executioner began in the U.S. Army. A Gulf War veteran, his military precision eventually curdled into a dark, calculated obsession. However, behind the cold gaze of the sniper lay a biological shadow that the legal system struggled to reconcile. Clinical research provided a new layer. MRI scans revealed a shrunken cortex and significant brain tissue loss, likely the result of severe, untreated head injuries. These are often associated with schizophrenia and delusional thinking, a biological decay forged in a childhood of extreme trauma. He was a boy beaten with hoses and electrical cords, a child once starved of safety, who grew up to starve an entire region of its peace. This neurological damage created a man who viewed human life not as people, but as tactical variables in a larger, dark manifesto. In 2001, he targeted 15-year-old Lee Boyd Malvo, not for adoption, but for systematic psychological dismantling. In the Washington woods, they lived out of a blue Chevrolet Caprice, refining shoot-and-scoot tactics with Muhammad as architect and Malvo as the instrument. While the prosecution framed him as a calculated mastermind, medical science suggested a broken machine, a brain physically failing its host. This leads to a haunting question. Can a man be held legally responsible for the actions of a brain that has physically begun to fail? Or does the law simply punish the biological wreckage of a life defined by trauma? The DC attacks were just the beginning. Malvo's testimony uncovered a calculated blueprint for national chaos that terrified investigators with its cold, military precision. Phase 2 moved to Baltimore, the targeted murder of a pregnant woman and a police officer, followed by a C4 bomb at the funeral packed with nails to slaughter first responders. The final stage reached into Canada, where Muhammad planned to recruit orphans, training impressionable young boys into a private army for mass shootings across America. If a man's vision for justice involves planting nails in caskets and turning orphans into assassins, where does the line between a soldier and a monster truly vanish? The most devastating betrayal didn't come from the law, but from the child Muhammad spent years dismantling. For Lee Boyd Malvo, loyalty wasn't a choice. It was a psychological survival tactic. As a teenager, he was caught in a paralyzing conflict, terrified that rejecting his father would leave him completely alone in a world he had been taught to hate. He existed in the suffocating space between a desperate need for a father's love and the visceral urge to survive the monster he was becoming. Initially, this dependence forced him to lie, shielding Muhammad from the death penalty. But when the psychological cage finally broke, the fallout was absolute. In a chilling courtroom confrontation, Malvo looked directly at his mentor and stripped him of his power, stating, "You took me into your home and you made me a monster," before labeling him a coward. Muhammad's final attempt to reclaim the bond, calling Malvo son only once during cross-examination, felt like a hollow echo of a relationship already executed by the truth. When a father's legacy is the creation of a monster, can there ever be a path back to humanity? As the sun set over Greensville Correctional Center on November 10, 2009, John Allen Muhammad was granted the final few choices left to a condemned man. He requested a meal of chicken with red sauce and small cakes, a mundane end for a man who once dictated the life and death of an entire region. His defiance remained clinical. He refused a spiritual advisor, and declined to choose between the electric chair and lethal injection, forcing the state to default to the needle. This silence was his final weapon. By refusing to engage with prison protocols, he ensured his internal motivations remained an impenetrable secret. In his final hours, he sat with his attorneys, exhibiting a cold detachment described as absolutely unafraid, an aura that victims' families viewed as ultimate arrogance. He had already surrendered to his fate, leaving the world to pick through the wreckage of his silence. At 9 p.m., Muhammad entered the execution chamber, his steps wavering, a haunting mirror to the zigzag walking patterns he once forced upon a panicked region. Secured to the cross-shaped table with thick leather straps, he was a man who had already surrendered to the machinery of the state. When asked for his last words, he offered only silence, staring at the ceiling as the chemicals began their work. At exactly 9:11 p.m., he was pronounced dead. The timing sent a visible ripple through the witness room. He had purchased his blue Caprice on the first anniversary of September 11th, forever obsessed with the chaos of that day. When a killer's life ends at the precise minute of his deepest fixation, is it the hand of fate or the ultimate irony of justice? The sniper's nest is silent, but the shadow of the blue Caprice remains. In Louisiana, Muhammad's son carries a name he cannot escape, while Lee Boyd Malvo lives as the son who denounced his creator. The terror ended, but the questions never did. While the state claimed a legal victory, the psychological scars of the Beltway attacks are permanent. Clinical evidence of a shrunken brain and childhood trauma reveals a haunting truth. The system executed a sniper it could never fully explain. Was the monster born in the army barracks, or in the silence of a childhood where no one heard him scream? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The terror ended, but the questions never did.